At 5 o'clock, I'm going to call to order our special city council meeting. In this particular one that we're going to be going over our recommendations of the bond commission to us. Today is July 24th, 2018. And thank you to all of the, well, I don't know if the entire bond commission is here. I think many of you are. So welcome. We're glad to have you to hear and understand our thoughts and our pieces of what we think is going to be good for our city. So the council was asked at our last meeting to go through the recommendations of the commission, and each of us were to do a little homework and decide which pieces of it we would like to see individually. And so what we're going to be doing tonight is basically going around the table to see how everyone has done their homework and what the preferences are. No decisions will be made tonight. It's key that you understand that. Tonight is simply discussion and input so that we can get a baseline of what we intend to do. And I believe the extreme interest that has been generated by our work is the fact that we are looking at all aspects of the possible debt that the city will incur and how that debt's going to be serviced over the course of a bond. There are three different options available to the city in terms of funding the work that you put together. Those three options are: first, pay as you go, which means we do not incur any debt. We find reserves, we find cash that's available in the budget as we forecast and what projects might be able to be paid as we go in cash. The second option is a certificate of obligation bond, which has basically the same terms as a general obligation bond, except that there are some provisions in there in terms of how it actually becomes enacted. And the detail of that can be explained a little later if you wish. And the third possibility is a general obligation bond. Well, I'll back up. The certificate of obligation bond can take pieces of what's been recommended in totality and break it up into smaller chunks. The general obligation bond is one that will go to the citizens in an election process, and that will occur in November. And that particular general obligation bond, excuse me.
That'll be fine.
The general obligation bond, we will ask, I'm going to ask City Manager Kevin Hugman to explain how that's going to appear, if we go that route, how it will appear on the ballot. Because it has different ways of, by statute, in terms of how that's presented to the citizens for election and a vote. So with that, what I'd like to do is just go around the table and ask each council member, and as we go, we'll make notes and try to create an ad hoc matrix to see which projects have sustained each individual council member's scrutiny, putting it that way, in terms of what the preferences are. So, Mr. Cooks, would you mind going first? Around that way.
Well, Mayor, I was gonna leave mine to the more senior people that's been around the table a bit longer. So if you don't mind, I'll defer.
You're senior enough for me.
I've been around the bud a little bit more, and so if you don't mind, I'll hear from these senior folks first.
I don't mind. So we'll start with senior member Ms. Thomas.
I think that the fire station is number one. And if that's all that gets done, I think that's, if we have to do one thing, I think that needs to be done. And I think that it should be on enough land, acquire enough land that can support a police station later. When we can do another bond. Because we all know that our police station is we've outgrown it. And they've outgrown this facility. So, and then, I think that this wasn't, this was the optional, the trail citywide, but I think it's important because it ties the whole city together, and the whole city would be able to benefit from the trails. And if we do the trails, I think we should do the bridge over Waterview Park. And that gives a unique trail system with that bridge connecting Harrington Park area to the, what's the other lake in District 5?
No.
Lake?
Which one is that?
Waterview. And for people who ride bikes or who run or something, you know, that's just a nice thing to do, is to go through the parks.
Hold on a minute.
And in my opinion, that makes the city, the whole city, like a park. If there's trail system connecting the parks, it makes, I think we ought to do the service center. I don't know if we do it at $2 million worth, but I think we ought to address the issues that are at the service center. I think we ought to do the Main Street between Kent Wisdom and I-20 because we can get matching funds or some funds from the county, and it would be prudent to take them up on that offer. And then the other two, and you know, I think we should keep on the splash pad simply because that has the most citizen input when we have town hall meetings. And that's been the case since I've been on the council, the first time. And then, but you know, and if that puts us over the taxable rate, it's on the, we do it through the bond, and if the citizens vote for that, then you know they're signing up for that increase. And then the last two things I think we should do are street lighting and parking at Harrington Park, and that's because it's a safety issue. Harrington Park at nighttime is dead black. It's dark, very dark. And when you have kids in the parking lot, I don't know about you, but that's one of mom's greatest fears, kids in parking lots. Because cars aren't paying attention or in the park. People aren't, and little kids you can't see over, you can't see them when it's just, so the lighting and then parking in Harrington Park. If there's a designated parking space, they're not parking along the side, they're not pulling in and out. And the reason why I bring these up is because I've experienced Harrington Park personally, and that's one of my ongoing issues with that park.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay, hold on just a minute. I get 12 million. Okay. Mr. Schwartz.
I'm gonna make it relatively easy. I want to do all the projects that the bond committee recommended. I've got a pecking order I want to do them in, but I want to do all of them.
So you're at 18.6.
Yes. You want my order or just the total?
Let's do a sidebar before we do that, because I think, Kevin, I'll ask you to explain how, if we go with the general obligation bond, how this will look on the ballot. Because it might tie into what Mr. Schwartz is saying here in terms of prioritization may not be necessary. So if you would explain that.
So, couple of things. So as I talked before about how it might appear on the proposition, and of course I'm going to make the caveat that I'm not bond counsel. Bond counsel will provide us the exact wording that's necessary that's in compliance with state law. However, and I also need to make a note that last week when I talked about how the propositions would be packaged, 3 propositions, I was mistaken on one thing. Found out we're still trying to clarify with our bond counsel. We've not been able to clarify, but it's our understanding though that on facilities, they cannot be packaged as together. So facilities have to go separately. So with that being said, assuming that all of these projects were to go to the citizens for a vote, there would essentially be 4 propositions. 1 proposition for park improvements, and it would be a total amount. 1 proposition for streets and transportation improvements, and it would be that total amount. 1 proposition for fire station number 1, new construction, and that corresponding amount, and 1 proposition for service center renovations, and that corresponding amount. The specific projects themselves are not required to be listed on the ballot. Those are really more for your public education campaign. But, and Richard, I'm going to ask you to make sure that I'm staying correct and straight on that.
That is correct.
So that's what, so again, they have to be grouped by like types of projects. The parks have to be grouped together, streets have to be grouped together. But it does not have to be specific. The voters are not voting on the specific projects themselves. But that is part of, obviously, the voters would want to know what is being planned with that, and that's why the projects are, help define that scope, that amount, and then also as part of that public education. Does that explain?
So, yes. So in that respect, I don't think it's necessary to prioritize, other than to say, if you agree with everything the commission has recommended, those are the blocks that will go forward in terms of the dollar values for each of those that are highlighted in yellow. Does that work?
Yes.
Okay. And if I could also add one other thing, just for clarification, Councilmember Thomas brought up the trail package. That was one of the options that the committee recommended. So if you were to go with those 2 additional options, those would also be additional propositions, each one of those, because if you go with the way they've recommended it, they are also attached to corresponding tax rate increases.
Okay, so trails would not be connected with parks.
They can be if you decide to take out something, or if you want to add that into part of that base package, the base bond proposal, then you can. It's up to you.
Well, that's it. Okay, that makes it, because I was thinking, while the park for the city trails is an option at 1.5, the tax rate indicated on the back sheet was only if we exceeded the 18.9 million we were allowed to do. So doing what Ms. Thompson's done, she's brought in different factors. She has included the city trails at 1.5, but her total comes up to 12 million.
And
So
bridge.
so the city trails could be done. We're underneath the $18.9 million caps. The city trails could be done without any additional taxes for the list that you put forward. Okay. Okay. Staying with what Mr. Cooks has asked, Ms. Jameson, you'd be next, because he would like to hear more senior people's recommendations.
That's what you asked?
Yeah, you'd like to see it?
Oh, please. Yeah,
I'm the most senior.
Senior on
in looking at when it's going to cost $1.3 million a year to service if we did the 18.9, and being assured that we have that, and since our budget we're looking at is a 7% increase, I feel like that we should just do the fire station and the service center, and maybe put it on a 5-year repayment, and then if we can do 1.3 million a year to service a bond, then we can knock out some of these projects like Armstrong and the Splash Park, because Kidsville is right around that, and if you're at the, doing the Splash Park, I don't like to get overextended, and I know I heard from a lot of the young people that were, some on the committee that didn't speak. They felt intimidated that night, and then some of the people that were at the park meeting that we had, and they are concerned about some of the proposals and the spending that's being done, and they're the ones that are going to be left paying for it. And I'm a pay-as-you-go kind of person. This is still doing a bond, but it's closer to like 7.3.
It would be a CO based on what you're saying rather than a GO. Or would you still want it to go as a?
I don't care.
Would make it, in terms of how it's presented, it wouldn't make any difference.
No,
Just wanna-
I think that those are necessary though. They're in dire need, and I think some of these others, like, I can't even fathom putting a concession stand on a 20-year note. That to me is ludicrous. And some of the other things that were proposed, I think that we can tighten the belt and come up with them. I don't want to get us into that position.
Okay.
And if something else comes up that we want to bond on later, I want to be able to do that.
Okay.
So,
All right.
that's my thought.
Mark, ready yet?
Already, yeah.
Or Pat, I'm sorry, Mr. LeBlanc, would you like to go next?
I would like to see the service center renovations, $2,305,000. Fire station number 2/administration, $1,321,000. City hall / police renovations, $2,349,000. Central fire station renovations at 37, $3,766,000. North Main Street between Camp Wisdom and I-20, 1.5. And Interstate 20 Gateway at Cedar Ridge and Camp Wisdom, $2.5 million. I think that total is $11,921,000, which is right close to the 10-year repayment.
Okay. Mr. Cooks?
All right. I also had the fire station, the number one item on the list, the service center renovation. Then from there, looked at the Kidsville playground parks, the trail citywide, and then the Cedar Ridge between Big Stone Gap and Wheatland street improvements.
How much was that one?
$2 million. But in conjunction with that, though, I know you talked about pay-as-you-go. I'd like to see a portion of this taken from as a pay-as-you-go as well as the bond, so you use a combination of both. In listening to calls I received, that 18.6 really was a good number, but on your request, you're asking if we had to trim it, what would we trim it to? And so I used that based on the recommendation. But all of it still requires some more feedback from others of my community that we're listening to. But in consignment, what you just talked about, trimming it down, that's how I trimmed it. But I did hear several calls, and so I want to keep looking through it since we're not making a complete call tonight. But those are the top items that I had on the list. That's Kidsville, Service Center, Fire Station, Trails, in Kidsville.
In Cedar Ridge, you said?
And Cedar Ridge, yes. Again, and then some to be looked at with the reserves that we have, that can take care of some. So you can do pay-as-you-go. you won't get up to 18.6 based upon the average numbers, but you can get some using the reserve that we have to pay for as we go as well. So come up with a combination of plan of using some existing funds as well as the bond.
So if I've got you right, I've got you at 11,550.
That's about right.
Mr.
With,
Burnett, oh,
again,
I'm sorry, yeah.
with the second part being identifying a project that we could pay as you go with, which I did not identify yet.
Okay.
For clarification, are you basing that on a 10-year bond then, that capacity is a 10-year?
Yes.
Thanks, Burnett.
I, like Mr. Schwartz, would be in favor of the bond. If we are looking at doing the trim and that stuff, it goes right down the line of fire station, service center, Kidsville, splash pad, lighting in Harrington. Main Street and Camp Wisdom.
We get Harrington Lights, that's,
Okay.
I'm sorry, yeah. And what?
Main Street and Camp Wisdom.
That is 1.5, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I've got fire station, well, clarify it for us if you would. Prefer the entire package that the commission's highlighted yellow. But then you just listed 5 projects. So help us understand exactly what your approach would be.
Well, I mean, I'm looking at it from the standpoint similar to what Mark is it's like when you do a 10-year at 11.5, that's where we're going or targeting, that's there, then I want to go lean towards. And I had trails marked too, so I didn't add the trails.
Oh, trails.
It's 1.5.
I get 11,150 on that. Okay. Okay, I put fire station number 1. And I'm using, in my calculations, I'm using 5 for that. I'm using 2.3 on the service center and 5 million on the fire station for just rough calculations. So fire station, service center, Main Street, Camp Wisdom. I'd like to see the city trails put on there as well, tie the city together. Kidsville. 5, splash pad. 750. I have some concern over, well, not concern, I've been looking at this Daniel Dale between Main and 67 and 3.1. I didn't realize how bad it was till I went and looked at it. Well, I drive the thing like 4 or 5 times a week. And I went over it twice today. Once intentionally to look at it again, once unintentionally. I just had to do some business going up 67. And I realized that every time I go up and down that little stretch of road, I'm dodging cracks in the road. I see cracks, I see buckles in the road, and I see a lot of problems with that road. I realize that it's a major thoroughfare. It's going to become even more major for the city once 67 is finished. And it's just in really bad shape. Now, where's Greg?
Right here, sir.
Oh.
I look very lawyerly today.
The 3.1 million is, what's the scope of that 3.1?
So, in rough estimates, what we look at is $1 million per lane mile. And so it's a 6-lane road, approximately half a mile long, which comes to the $3 million. And so it would be basically a replacement in kind.
Total replacement. So that fixes all the buckles and fixes all
Yes,
the cracks.
and so as you know,
Some of the lanes are beginning to have like a 2 and 3 inch
Yes, sir.
variance between.
so that particular stretch of road has had multiple water line breaks. So just in the year I've been here, last winter, we had 3 breaks. And so every time we have breaks, we got to go back in and do patches. And then it also is what weakens your subgrade. And so that's what we've had experience in that segment of Daniel is just a cause of multiple breaks. Now we are, as part of our 5-year program, looking at doing all the utility work underneath the water line and the wastewater lines under there, and then synchronizing with Dallas Water Utilities, because they also have a main line that feeds the tank. So that's our supply. All those things are under that segment of Daniel Dale. So the idea would be to synchronize the road repair to follow the subsurface, all the subsurface replacement that needs to be done in that area.
So fixing the water lines, would that be a 20-year fix or something you can break again in 10? Considering
Well,
if we're going to spend that kind of money, I mean, it's going to.
Ideally, the water lines do last, 40 years. That's always the idea. And we know that what's there now is at the end of its life. So again, the plan from Public Works is to replace in the next 5 years. I don't know where we have it on our program, but in the next 5 years, our plan is to replace the water and wastewater lines under Daniel Dale. Because they're just, again, they're continuously breaking. And the intent
Is
would
that
do
just
it.
due to age, or is there a ground shift
I think
going
it's,
on that's causing?
well, I think it's age. I don't think that we have all the large main that's underneath that supplies it and our stuff on top, and then a lot of it's age as well. So we'll fix it. Again, obviously we usually try to have the utility fund at least pay for the road above it, above the pipe, but I mean, it's a 6-lane road and we're not using all of it with utilities. Utility fund can't cover it.
Okay. Let's see what I come up with.
Would we be straightening out the curve? Would we be straightening out the curve when you do that? Because that was what was.
What we have planned and what our pricing, and again, we would have to just see what the budget allows, but our plan was just a replacement in kind.
What is the segment that you're looking at, Greg? Is it all the way from Main Street to?
It would be from Maine all the way to Danville, and there is a curve, but I think it's also tied to, we've still got to tie it into the rest of Danville.
I know that the recommendation when we did the street thing was to straighten out that curve.
I wasn't anticipating having to buy any additional right of way.
My total comes to 15,650, which puts it at a 15 year.
You're still, can you go down that again? How much?
Pardon me?
What was your amount again?
15,650, which puts it on a 15 year. Let's see where we have unanimity, if we can. I'm just looking at all the lists. Is anybody else making a list as we were going, or was I doing the only one? You got one? Okay. All right, I think we have fire station at 5. We have service center at 2.3.
Now, we need to clarify, there are a couple different things on there about fire stations. So you're just saying fire station, which one are you?
Oh, that's right, Mr. LeBlanc, you broke it out. Let's see, you had,
There are 3 items that mention fire stations, so which one are you saying? Your unity?
the one, let's see, I'm looking at what you said. You said fire station at 1.3.
Just below that, Mr. Mayor. Renovation and expansion.
Councilmember LeBlanc referenced fire station number 2.
Right,
Admin.
at 1.3.
And you also mentioned, he also listed fire station number 1, is that correct?
Yeah.
I think you're talking about fire station number 1.
Yes,
there.
central.
That's the one. that-
Central.
Central.
That's the one I was talking
Everyone
about.
has mentioned.
Do we have that one down right for you? Fire
Yeah,
station
I'm just
number
trying to
one.
make sure which one you were talking about. 'Cause
Yeah, I was
you
just-
got 3 things on here, and you just
No.
said fire station.
Yeah, I'm talking about fire station number 1.
All right.
Yeah, central fire station.
Service center was unanimous.
I've got that one. Those are the only 2. Do we have complete unanimity on? The rest is a very nice list of parceling out the recommendations, which I think is healthy and excellent for the council to have done their work on that, so we can see how things lay out. Again, no decisions are going to be made. One of the things that just I'm thinking out loud again. I'm concerned about Harrington Park. If you took everything at Harrington Park and put it all together as a bulked up project, it's $2,050,000. It's a heavy, the sticker shock is there. What I'm not sure about Harrington Park is its, word I'm looking for, is its value to the city. I think it is valuable to the city in that if we, I'm going back to what the commission recommended. Let's see, Sandy, did you make that presentation on the park?
I did, yes.
Yes, Sam. My takeaway from what you said was that Harrington Park has value to the city in that it can and would, or is, an attractive facility for bringing in a lot of tournaments to the city.
Yes, ma'am.
And those tournaments would be a lot of individuals from outside our borders. How many cities are we talking? I mean, are we stretching to go like Grand Prairie, Arlington, Irving, or is it just like the best Southwest cities that we can have tournaments and attract a lot of people to our town through that?
I can't answer that question directly because I'm not sure within the Duncanville soccer and baseball how many tournaments they manage to bring back. Do you have any figures on that?
I do. For baseball, we've had 6 tournaments there this year. We brought in approximately $10,000 of value to both the city as well as Duncanville Boys Baseball, $6,500 to the city and $3,000 to the Boys Baseball Association.
But presumably, Bill, that's only fees. There's
Those are
nothing we can reckon on motels, eating,
Those are,
buying
we do not
gas.
track. You're right. We do not track any of that
Yeah,
information.
yeah,
That's
there's no way
correct.
we could.
So,
So you said 6 tournaments,
correct. 6 baseball tournaments.
and it's six, what was the dollar amount, 6,000?
For the city.
To the city, $6,500. And they've also paid it to the Boys Baseball Association, which they in turn use to help fund projects at the park. In the amount of $3,000, so close to $10,000 have been invested back into the community through those tournaments.
What about soccer?
Direct.
What about soccer tournament?
They only have one major tournament, and that's a local tournament. So we did not calculate those numbers. That's and those fees are included in their usage of the park. So there's no additional funds.
But what about the ESPN tournament we got?
A few years ago,
Yeah.
we did have an ESPN to support this soccer tournament, and that did bring in a number of teams from actually around the state and outside of the state, I believe. And it did fill up hotels, but I do not know any numbers off the top of my head as to how many we had. I would guess maybe we had 75 to 100 teams.
So that's my curiosity in terms of, can we piecemeal some things in that? Like Ms. Jamison said, that a 20-year repayment on a concession stand is a little. It's like when you buy a new house and they say, "Oh, we'll put a fence. We'll build you a brand new fence, and you can pay for that brand new fence over the next 20 years or 30 years." On
It's
the
like
mortgage.
we're not just, I mean, the term concession stand makes it sound like what you see like the little shaved ice shack, and that's not really what it is. I mean, what we're talking about is a CMU block building with restrooms, eating area, pavilion type area.
Post-mixed
you know,
drink, post-mixed drink, and
Mixed drinks?
post-mix. Soda.
Oh, yes. Sorry, my mind was going to that.
It is actually-
Yes, right, yeah, I mean, concessions, right, sodas and stuff, but I mean, it is a solid, it is a building that is built for, a 20-year life or more, so it's not a 10-year building, wood frame type thing.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I could just add, the thinking of the park board and also of the commission was that it made more sense to do Harrington as one because it has so many different needs. As Councilwoman Thomas said, it is dangerous at night. The parking is terrible. It's congested. We need to get that rationalised. And to be perfectly blunt, if we could bring the restrooms, which are appalling, up to the standard of disgusting, it would be a major improvement.
Art, do you have numbers on how many kids are served through
Yes, we have-
soccer and baseball?
In soccer, we serve approximately 1,750 kids. In baseball, around 750 to 800 kids.
Again, I know this is kind of off just a little bit. I know you talked about 6,500 with 6 baseball tournaments. To my comment about football, and I'm not talking about football here in the park, but football brings about $14,000 with 6 tournaments, just FYI for us. And so if you want to bring that up to standard, you really have to host a whole lot more baseball tournaments to really bring in everything we're talking about.
And that's why I'm asking the question, if it were a more desirable facility in the overall, would it truly be more attractive to bringing in many, many more tournaments? Or would they simply say, well, I wonder what they've got in Grand Prairie, I wonder what they've got in Midlothian, I wonder what they've got in, and I don't know what Cedar Hill has, know what DeSoto has in terms of large parks that would be comparable to Harrington. I really don't know.
And Prairie has a huge park for soccer right there on 1382.
Yeah,
Huge.
yeah, I know that one.
And see,
I don't know about that, I know more, I see more soccer fields than I know about baseball fields.
what's that one, is that Grand Prairie or Cedar Hill?
Cedarville has a large
Cedar Hill.
soccer.
Soccer,
Yeah.
soccer, baseball field, I'm talking about.
They have-
Amazing.
they have-
Out there by,
They have a
out
big-
by Tanger Ridge Golf.
Right,
They have
baseball.
baseball and soccer.
Is there room at Harrington Park to put in football, like down at the,
It would only be for practice, I think, at this point, looking at it again. It wouldn't bring in the revenue we're talking about for baseball now.
Do you forgot anything else about that stadium?
Steve, no. Mr. Emerson was asking about using the football stadium. We haven't had an opportunity to, I haven't personally made any gestures towards Dr. Smith about that, but I think it's really on the table in terms of looking at. Has anything been done by staff to do that? It's worth looking at in terms of, it's an aside. It's taking care of our football league and what it can be done with that. So
And share
certainly
revenue a little bit as well.
yeah, yeah. So it's on the table. We haven't come to a decision on that yet.
I think it's also important to note, since you're talking about the sister cities, that the 4 cities have gotten together and have put together a package, if you will, of all of our athletic facilities that are available to each of us. And we are working as a team, as a group, to try to attract larger regional tournaments we can all share, where we can accommodate more teams in the best Southwest area for all of our cities. So that is something that we're undergoing as well. And I think the new restrooms and concession stands will certainly help Duncanville be a better player, a better teammate in that effort.
Don't kid yourself, we're competitors,
Oh,
and we compete for getting those tournaments.
we share a lot of tournaments.
Yeah, but we
Most of the tournaments
compete.
these days are 150, 200 teams. There's no one city that can accommodate them.
I've seen it too much. Like, we go in on advertising and it goes somewhere else. We go in on things together and it goes somewhere else. So I think we have to look out for Duncanville when we're at this table.
And even the 6 tournaments we've had, I think most of those have been shared tournaments with DeSoto. So we really are working to be partners on these types
Yeah,
of
because
projects.
Grand Prairie has never said they wanted to be a part of it. But I know that they get a lot of tournaments at that one at 1382 because I went and saw Shreveport play there. That came. So, and they've never wanted to be a part of us.
I was just thinking too, there's DeSoto has a ballpark at Polk and Wintergreen. I don't know how many fields are there, and I don't know what kind of shape it's in, but it just occurred to me. I don't know if that's the only park that they've got, the ball fields.
No.
No, there's others.
Oh,
And I think that we also have to be aware of the community and how they feel about like the field house, and that it's not gone as well as they had wanted. So we're not just sports here. We're not. We're a lot more. And I think that we've got to expand that. We need to be the arts. We need to have things for other people too. It can't just be sports. And I know that was a thought at one point, but a lot of the kids that come here and play don't live here.
Well, and that's kind of a function of the size of Duncanville Independent School District.
Right.
34 square miles, and we're 11 square miles.
Right.
So there's a lot of children that are coming into our borders that don't live in our
Right.
borders.
But we also need to think of things that will be for all the citizenry here, since they're paying for it, rather than just, because like I hear about, we've got all these hotels, that's not for me. And so I think we need to be aware of, like, Kidsville and the Splash Park, that is for, not that people won't come here, but they have told us they want
They're
that.
magnets.
Yes, they told us.
Those are magnet attractions.
But that went out several years ago, out on a questionnaire to the entire city. and came back that they wanted a splash pad, number one, years ago, a water park. So, and we never did it. That was probably, I don't know, over 10 years ago. So, some things for people who live here.
You know, if I needed personally to bring down my list, I guess, 15,650. I'd almost take out the city trails for $1.5 million. I just, you know, the 3.1 million for Duncanville is a sticker shock, admittedly. But it's only gonna get worse. Yeah, you know, when 67 is finished, it's gonna get more use than it is today. And so.
Mayor,
Yes,
I did
sir.
some tallying, and the trails, they had 4, did you want trails? Did you want them?
No, I didn't ask. I'm
Okay,
going with you.
so I had trails.
Yes, you did.
With 4.
Yeah.
And Splash Pad had 4, Kidsville had 5, North Main had 4, and then Harrington had the 2, but with me, with just for parks and lighting, that's 3. Danielville had 3, Cedar Ridge had 3, and the Gateway had 1, and Central Fire, no, the City Hall Police had 1, and the I-20 Gateway had 1. So that, I'm just letting everybody know the consensus there.
And Mayor, you were speaking coming down. I was reconsidering going up to the 15.
Oh, okay.
To really, and think about asking Kevin, what other funding could we pay-as-you-go project that's done here that we could take, even if we had to thin it out over a 2 or 3 year period of time, that we could prioritize what's next as a pay-as-you-go, and then have, so when I spoke about both, I was speaking in that direction, so I'm not sure how much funding we would need to do pay-as-you-go in a staged standpoint, still reducing the amount to your amount that you talked about on 15. Now, I'm not saying that everything you had on your list is a check, but again, I like the dollar amount first. And just compromising, I think it's a great compromise from 10 to what the bond committee recommended, which was the 20, and then middle spot being 15.
15. Just as a comment, we need to notice that when you look at the debt capacity spreadsheet that was given to us, I think you've all got this, looking at it. Regardless of how we go, the debt service remains static at 1.3. No matter the term, no matter the dollar amount. The debt service is going to be $1.3 million roughly. So, Richard, would you, I know you went over it once, but would you do it again for us in terms of how does the city ensure that over the term of the bond, whether it's 20, 15, or even 5, how do we, the city, ensure the debt service is going to be available?
The best way that I could explain it is that when I have to provide the estimations to Dallas County as they prepare our effective and our rollback tax rates. They also provide our final M&O versus debt tax rate. And what I do is I essentially take the estimated total property tax and I peel off the $1.3 million, I peel that off. And then the calculations made, well, you know, how many cents is that on the tax rate, essentially. So everything that's left over, of course, is available to the general fund for maintenance and operations. And so each year, that's something that's a requirement, as long as you have debt, that you have to have that taken care of on the tax rate. It has to be dedicated for nothing more than debt service.
Our tax rate of 0.7584 is split up into two pieces. As Richard said, the maintenance, the operations and maintenance piece of it, and the interest and sinking fund. That is, the interest and sinking fund, or the debt service, is about 6.4 cents of that 75.8 cents. That is dedicated to debt service. It's always there. It's part of the tax rate that property owners are paying now. So it is there as long as that tax rate is in it. And so if you issue debt, that tax rate stands, that interest and sinking fund amount stays that in there as a component. So it doesn't go away.
Okay. I was not completely aware of that. So,
The Attorney General's office actually won't allow you to issue debt unless you can demonstrate the ability to pay. And the ability to pay is a requirement that you make those calculations. And as Kevin just explained, that currently it's about 6.5 cents. As property values go up, that amount essentially that we have to dedicate to get the 1.3 million will go down. So it's a little bit lesser each year. But it has,
Say that again now? As the property values goes up, it goes down?
well, yeah, if you have a larger property tax base and you're peeling off $1,325,000 each year, then if property values go up, that amount that's a percentage of that, of course, is less. Now, if property values decrease, then that becomes a larger chunk.
Okay, and the potential of this cap that may happen down in Austin, that when they'll put a cap on how much, that won't affect the 1.3?
It wouldn't affect the 1.3, it would affect what's left over available for maintenance and operation.
Because we gotta cover the debt service first.
Another way to look at the debt service as well, the 6.5 cents that's dedicated to debt service, is if we leave 6.5 cents in there for debt service, if property values go up, it actually means you have more that you can dedicate to debt service. So if property values continue to increase in a few years, you may have more additional capacity within that same amount of tax rate.
But as properties go up, citizens pay more taxes. See, I mean, it sounds nice when you say your properties go up. You have more money. We have more money because they're taxed at a higher rate. I mean, the rate's not higher, they're having to pay more because their house is worth more.
property values are out of our control.
Right.
Everything functions, not everything, but our revenue stream from that is a function of that, which is out of our control. But we would always set aside that 6.5, or to Mr. LeBlanc's question or point. So if property values the next 2 or 3 years go up 8, 9, 10%, would it or would it not be prudent to reduce the 6.5 cents?
Well,
Or we're not even allowed to?
It actually fluctuates according to what the property values do. I can only reserve enough money to cover debt service. And that
Not in excess of what the debt service?
Not in excess of
The
that.
debt load.
But I can only reserve that amount. So, and I can just give you an example. If our estimated property values increase 7% this year, instead of it being 6.5 cents, that $1.3 million will only be slightly over 6 cents. It'll drop almost a half a cent off of the amount that you have to dedicate to debt service. But I have to do that. So if in the future you wanted to issue more debt, then as Kevin pointed out, you could actually reserve more on the tax rate and still have enough left over to do maintenance and operations, if that was the desire.
Interesting. Okay.
So we're really, regardless of how we place this, we're still talking about how do we get revenue. And just learning from our sister cities around, I just noticed that Grand Prairie has, and I'm talking about the bond piece, but Grand Prairie has a 1/4 cent sales tax just on street maintenance sales tax every year. And what that is set aside for streets. I would imagine the reason they would do that because you're gonna continue to have street maintenance ongoing. You know, we're not gonna fix it at one time. So with this in the bond, which is still a great start with it, next year we're gonna have a whole other amount with street maintenance again. And so something to consider later, not today, but just bringing up just the learning from that source would be something we'll kind of think about at some point.
So, just to clarify too, when we're talking street maintenance, which we do in the operations and maintenance part and of our general fund, we talked about that the other night. This is different. This does not get covered under street maintenance. These projects are street reconstruction, capital improvement, 20-year life projects. The only funding we have available right now to do any of those projects is through a bond. We do not have any other source of funds for those projects. But to your point, that list is going to continue to grow. As we have more streets that fail, that are close to failure and then end up failing over the next several years, the list will continue to grow.
Yes, sir. Okay.
But as house values go up, the ad valorem tax that we bring in goes up. And some of these things can be paid for out of it. I mean, we got $3.2 million more last year, more than we'd had before. So some of that can be spent in other places. It doesn't, I mean, we can't, it's not like you can spend all that on what you want to, and then this needs to be over here. I think you need to look at the big picture, and you just can't tax the bejeepers out of people.
I think the big elephant in the room for us goes right back to what we all know what's really the cause, and that's economic development. As we know that the property tax carries the city, our sales tax has to really increase. In order to do that, it's economic development. And so we really continue, although we get a lot of good conversation around this now, I hope our strong conversations go around economic development, because that's going to help increase paying for what we need to pay for as well.
I have a question. So we know that there may be a possibility for matching funds from the county for North Main Street. And in the past, there has been talk about matching funds for trails. Is there any other possibilities that any of these can get matching funds?
Any of the other projects?
Yes.
Well, parks projects, and Bart can elaborate on it, there are Parks and Wildlife Department grants that are available. They're typically matching grants. They're very competitive, very hard to get, but we would apply for any grants that we can. We would apply for any kinds of transportation grants that we can through COG or probably not TxDOT, none of these are TxDOT roads. The county does have some funding available. We would put in a request for more funding for any of the projects that they might be able to also match. Any other grants that we can, we will look at, but there's no guarantee on grants. Anything that we can get, certainly we'll leverage any funds. But if we don't have any funds available for the projects, then we're not going to be able to go to the
trails.
Pardon?
What
COG was
The
the one that was
forecast.
going to give us a grant on the trails before.
What does it look
was
like?
COG.
for trails?
I don't know do you know what kind of grants are out there for trails? I know of some that have been out there before that are called, through TxDOT, but.
Yeah, there are several through COGS, some of them also
Yes.
come through Texas Parks and Wildlife. There's a number of different sources for grants for trails as well as parks.
And
I
what
would
COG
envision-
wanted was, they wanted us to match the fund, their fund, and they wanted them to connect from park to park to park to park, and possibly even like to Cedar Hill.
That is typically the goal of any of those grants. They want you to be able to connect your neighborhoods to your schools or to your shopping areas.
All of our parks.
Schools are really important to them.
Well-
In particular. So,
Way
so that
to go,
connectivity, it
project.
certainly gives you more
So,
leverage in
yeah,
getting those
so
grants.
what I'm saying is that, if we pass, if we put the trails in here, there's a possibility that we could get matching funds, because
Yeah.
we show, we have a plan, we have a parks plan now, and we have funding, which we didn't have in the past, which made it hard for us to get that funding. We have a plan and we didn't have.
If I understand the mechanics of that, somewhere on a piece of paper, we have to demonstrate that the council has actually funded X number of dollars in order to go to get matching funds.
But if we pass a bond,
That's what I'm saying. It's a catch-22. We can't go looking for matching funds unless we actually pass something and saying that we are moving forward, because the matching funds would be, picket for the trails, you would ask, we're gonna fund $1.5 million, hypothetically,
My
go
mind-
asking for $1.5 million.
Yeah, my mindset would be pass it because it's good for the city, and then if we get it, that's great, but we know that there's a possibility that we may get it, which is, it's just gravy, is what I'm saying.
If we can get a matching grant, then that means we can do twice as
You
much.
do more, yes.
If we don't, we do what we can with the amount that's there.
But it's not like we don't have any money, is my point. We're taking in more money, we can tighten our belt, we don't have to do everything I think in the budget, we need to look at that. I don't want to buy police cars every 2 years. If that's something that we started doing, I don't want to do that. That we turn over existing cars every 2 years. I don't know anybody that does that, and I don't think we should. So, I mean, there's areas in the budget, we're not through with that yet, that there's money.
We went over that the other day, and we showed where the funds were going. And a lot
Oh,
of that is
it's
going into
tremendous.
street maintenance. We're
Right.
adding them to street maintenance, and I would also say that when you say we had 3.2 million in new revenue last year, that was not correct. And I said that many times last year during the budget, that was not correct. We had $1 million that we funded into revenues that was leftover excess funds from the year before. And part of it was the anticipated street maintenance fee, which we never did. And we had new revenues of about 1.5 million. same
So
as
we
this
only
year.
got $1.5 million in ad valorem taxes over the previous year when housing rates went up.
Yes, ma'am. It was actually less than that because that included sales tax. So the new just like this year, I showed you Thursday, new revenues were about 1.5 million between property taxes and sales taxes. About a little over $1 million was property tax, and the rest was sales tax and new revenue.
But we don't know this year what we're gonna take in, 'cause-
I'll know tomorrow.
okay.
The certified rolls are due out tomorrow.
But I guess it doesn't matter to me where the source is coming from. There is revenue out there. It's not like we're sitting here with no revenue and that anything that we plan for, we've got to get some more. We've got some here. We need to tighten our belt and not spend everything everywhere that, you can't have everything. You can't run a business that way. You can't run a household that way. You can't do it. There's got to be some accountability. And I think that's what being a good steward of people's money is what they want.
I agree.
So,
And I think we went over that last Thursday.
So Mayor, back to your point, as you look at this, are you looking to guide us in the direction of saying, not the project itself, but the bond amount? Should it be 18.6? Should it be 15.7? Should it be 11? Should it be 15 years or 20 years? Is that what you're trying to guide this conversation?
I was looking to see how each of you would perceive this list in terms of the dollars. Not necessarily the priorities, listing them 1 through 8 in terms of the priority, because that was my intent last Thursday, but then since learning what it actually looks like on a ballot, we're looking at in terms of bulking it into category. So I'm not attempting to guide you anywhere.
Well, it's just
I'm
what
trying
direction,
to-
what direction.
I think
you're-
the reason I asked you all to take a look at that was so that we could interface with each other and get a sense of how each individual is looking at the benefits of acquiring debt for the city or the detriment of acquiring debt for the city.
So-
And each of us has a different perspective on that. And that's what I was looking for, was was the input, not looking for consensus at all at this point, just trying to find out how each of us examines the list that the commission has put together in terms of where we might be spending money. And if we choose to spend money, do we do it through the least expensive mode in terms of debt to the city? Or at what point do we incur debt? And, you know, I think at this point, going through the list and what we've come up with, I think we've almost already reduced it to a 15-year versus a 20. Because none of the dollars, well, of course, Mr. Schwartz had put the whole package with it.
Well, I want to address something here in a minute.
Please.
Let's not forget that we're talking about a bond program and where there's an election. If the citizens want this, let's give it to them. If they don't want it, they won't vote for it. We've got a package put together here that will stay within our sinking fund, our interest and sinking fund, and let's put it out to the voters. And there will be ample advertising, this committee around the room. We can't do it, but the committee can. They'll list these projects, even though they won't be on the ballot. The voters will know what each one of these projects will be. And let's let the voters decide. And I strongly believe that tomorrow this is going to cost more. We need to, you know, set this up and do it today, get it going. Because tomorrow, next year, 5 years down the road, on pay-as-you-go, we'll be paying a lot more for one of these projects than we will if we go ahead and design it and get it built as quickly as we can.
Then that's what I was thinking too. I've had got phone calls, a lot for, a lot against. And my position is, okay, let the voters decide. Now I have, you know, I have what I think is important, but in the end, you know, they'll have 4 bonds that they can vote for, and they'll decide it. And and that's their comfort level and what they want to raise their taxes or not.
Of course, this wouldn't raise
Yeah.
taxes.
I mean, but I'd like the trail system going into.
Well,
That would
I'm
raise
not
it.
against trails.
That would
It's just-
raise it a little bit.
It wasn't.
But they can decide that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could put that as an option.
They can decide that.
Question to y'all, are we at least in agreement that no matter what we do, we will not exceed the 18.9 that the bond council has advised us, and which would incur greater property tax to our citizens? Are we at least agreed, no matter what happens, we are not going to increase?
Well, Leslie just said she wants to add the trails.
The trails.
I
if-
know.
That
so if-
is an option.
So if
I
it
know.
increases, they vote for it. That's, if they want it, they'll vote for it. If they don't want it, it won't pass.
But I think to that, Leslie, is that but they also rely on the council to help guide, and I know guidance is not the right word for some, but to guide in making
But
the
the law,
financial decision.
but the law is that if it's gonna make it go up, it's explicitly put on the ballot. They'll know that that's what you're voting for. So, I mean,
It would
it's not
have
hidden.
to have a corresponding tax increase, exactly what that impact would be. If there were anything above the $18.9 million. And so that would have to be explicitly stated, so that they would know if they vote for that, that this is gonna cause the property tax rate to increase.
You know, I could, if we were talking about putting it on for election, I would say, if you did put these 18.6, the voters also may tell us that it may come back down to the 15.7 based
Yeah.
upon the vote.
Yes.
Yeah.
Correct.
So if that's the case,
Yeah.
I mean, I think, I don't see everybody voting on everything.
Yes.
Personally, I can't see that this council can withstand any reaction from our citizens that we're even proposing anything that's gonna raise property taxes.
We're giving them a choice.
Give them a choice, but I don't think we ought to go forward and say, hey, you have a choice of increasing your property taxes if you want it. That's a public relations nightmare. We're gonna be in damage control. I think our responsibility as a city council is to ensure that we do not increase property taxes.
I agree with that.
You know, I don't want to, I'm very uncomfortable putting anything out there that says, citizens, here's a list of stuff, and oh yeah, you can do this if you want to, and oh yeah, if you want to, then your property tax are going. I don't think we even ought to recommend that as a city council. It should not be our position that we're recommending anything that's going to increase property taxes.
I agree, that's why I said 18.6.
We have to be careful on bond programs as a city council, what we can recommend. That's for this committee to do.
Well, I understand, but, okay. Hypothetically, if city trails become so important to us, then something in these things highlighted in yellow has to go.
I agree.
I agree. And
Which
it did
means
get-
we're not
it
going
did
to, you know,
get consensus.
we're not going to do anything that's going to cause an increase in property tax. If you want to bring in 1.5, take out 1.5 somewhere. I just think our citizens will not be happy with any of our elected officials, usins, sitting around this table if we propose anything that's going to increase property taxes. And you know, Mark, I'm not trying to guide anything here. You know, I think there's something wonderful about the 7 of us sitting around this table right now. And I think we're operating and we're thinking as a team. And we're each expressing our own personal opinions and or, you know, I don't consider my opinion any more weighty than any of the rest of you. So I'm not, so I got the title mayor. I mean, it's what? I only got 1 out of 7. You know?
Yeah, no, the word guide.
So I'm not, I don't want anybody leaving here thinking that my opinions are some sort of guidance. They're not. It's just, I feel very comfortable communicating very openly with you all, and hope that you do as well, that your opinions are from the heart and they're honest, and you don't feel any, or that you feel total freedom in expressing yourself. I mean, I do, and that's why I'm doing it. I'm a very communicative individual, and we've got some very weighty decisions ahead of us right here. So I think it's prudent upon each of us to express yourself so that we all understand. And not just among ourselves, but this room is full of our constituents. And they're gonna have just as loud a voice out there in the community as we have sitting around this table, if not a louder voice.
Yes, thank you.
Most of them recommended this.
I know.
Oh, they did not. You're talking about citizens?
I'm talking about the people sitting around this room.
Yeah, but that is a committee. They don't speak for the citizens.
Well, the
You were
citizens are gonna
elected.
vote.
You were elected. You weren't. We were elected. You're the one that will answer. If they don't like something, they won't call up somebody on the bond committee. They'll call you.
But they get a chance to vote.
Right.
And that's louder than a telephone call.
Excuse me?
If
A
they
vote,
vote, if
yeah.
they voted
Right.
down, it's down.
That's right.
If they voted up, we build it.
That's right. If they voted
And
down
that-
though, then it's
Any number
just
of
dead.
telephone calls.
Then it's just dead.
You know, that's the
So-
way it's always been.
Right. My thought was just to find something that was more palatable, that was something that would pass.
I think this is a list of good projects. And, I mean, all we do is put it out to the voters and see what happens. If we want to add the trail, I mean, we need to take something out of here. We don't want to put it as an option.
How would y'all like to do a field trip, take a look at these things ourselves? I mean, the bond commission did it. They've got a map, they went and saw everything. And I kind of like to see everything myself. I don't travel every one of these projects. My son used to play baseball at Harrington Park. That was 18 years ago. So I haven't been in Harrington Park in 18 years. So I really don't know what it looks like today. y'all wanna do a field trip?
Yes.
Sure.
Take a look at these things, and I think if we put our eyes on it, just like the commission's put eyes on it, then I think it'll be good for us all. You know, and I
Less
know-
air conditioning.
and what a
Yes, it is.
You still gotta get out and walk.
I'm not, I want to be clear that I'm not trying to kick the can down the road. I'm just, I just think it's just one more piece of our exercise of due diligence, because when town halls come up, and the 7 of us are there to answer questions of our citizens, we can say, yep, I've looked at them all. Each of us can say, I've seen everything on the list. Whatever ends up being on that list, we can stand up and honestly, truthfully say we've looked at them all. So if anybody got an idea when we can rent some convertible Camaros from Freedom again?
We have the vans. The
Get
senior
get on the bike.
You got
I ain't gonna find out trails if you don't get on the bike. Get on the bike.
Okay. It's all right.
Give me a two-seater.
Yeah.
The neck can be in the front, and I'll be in the back.
So if you want,
Pat.
should we pick a Saturday to do that instead of during the week?
No.
If you want to look at all of
Weekends are month for our family.
Well, so I'm asking, that's what you want to do.
If you want to look at all of the projects on the list, we allocated about 4 hours. So the tour was about 4 hours long. If you just want to look at the ones that are highlighted, then that would be less time, probably 2 hours. Just to kind of give you an idea of time frame.
We already know about the Central Fire Station and Service Center, right? I mean,
You obviously,
no, I mean, as a group, if you enjoyed it, I've seen it.
I've seen the service center, but not the bowels of it, you know, where the real bad parts of it are.
Well, they didn't take it for a tour when you
Yes.
were mayor?
Oh,
Well, I got a tour when I got on the council. and I
Bless you, child, I didn't get a tour. Well, if it'll be 2 hours, we could do it like, still got enough daylight, we could do like 5 to 7. Would that work for you, Patrick?
Yes.
Okay. You getting off work?
I'll be all right. We can make it work.
Make it work. Okay, somebody toss in some dates. Our deadline for completing this and actually putting it together is what, 8th of August?
right, so if the council wants to call a bond election, you have to call the election no later than 90 days or earlier than 78 days prior to the election, which is August 8th to August 20th. So your regular council meetings are August 7th and August 21st, so you're 1 day too early and 1 day too late. So you will have to call a special meeting between August 8th and August 20th.
Okay, so what looks good for a city tour? Figuring 2 hours if we just do Osceola.
how long are you gonna be out of town this week?
I leave tomorrow afternoon, I get back late Friday night.
How's about looking for July 31st?
Say again?
We already have some meeting on the 31st. What was it?
I've got
thought we
Duncanville
talked about
ISD
it, wasn't it?
education, that's,
So what are we doing the committee thing? Interviews.
commissions and schedule business.
Wednesday or Thursday is okay with my calendar.
August.
August 1 or August 2. Well, I've got something at the senior center August 2,
Yeah, I've got
6 to 8.
I've got a conflict on the second. I can come, but I'd be a little bit late.
So August 1, Wednesday, August 1,
I'm
like
gonna catch up.
4 to 6 or 5 to 7. What's best for you, Patrick? Later? 4 or 5?
It's always later, but I'm coming from the north, so 5 would probably be
5. Don, you think 5?
Yeah.
Got that?
What day?
Patrick,
first,
would you say
August
Wednesday?
1st.
Does that work
Wednesday,
better?
August 1st.
I could do 5.
Mark?
I'm fine.
Okay. Leslie, okay with August 1st, 5 to 7?
Yeah, as it
Okay.
stands.
Okay. Gas up the van, and we'll do it August 1st. 5 to 7 tour. Okay. With that, I think our business for this evening is concluded. I appreciate all the thought you put into this, and the energy, and the very open discussions that we've had tonight. Richard's input and understanding the financial aspect of it, and looking at how the new information on how it's going to appear on the ballot. That's we need to understand that as well. So, we will adjourn at 6:23.
Richard,